Muscular System Lecture. The objectives for this lecture are to list, locate in the body, and compare the structures and function of the three major types of muscle tissue. We will also discuss the structure and function of skeletal muscle and describe the role of other body systems in movement. Muscular tissue enables the body and its parts to move. The movement caused by ability of the muscle cells called fibers to shorten and contract. Muscle cells shorten by converting chemical energy obtained from food into mechanical energy, which causes movement. There are three main types of muscle tissue in the body, and you'll want to know the difference between these three types for your test. There's skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscle. Skeletal muscle tissue under a microscope reveals striations or crosswise stripes, and contractions can be voluntarily controlled. Cardiac muscle cells branch frequently. They are characterized by a unique dark band. Sometimes we think they're a little bit like striations, but you will see intercalated discs within these striations, and that's how we tell the difference between cardiac muscle and skeletal muscle. Interconnected in nature in the cardiac muscle cells allow the heart to contract efficiently as a unit. So cardiac muscle is only seen in the heart. Smooth muscle lacks the cross stripes or striations that we see in cardiac or striated skeletal muscle. When seen under a microscope, it appears smooth. We find these in the walls of hollow visceral structures such as the digestive tract, blood vessels, and ureters. And contractions are not under voluntary control. These are all involuntary. So here is a picture of the three different types of muscles. So we have skeletal muscle fibers. You can see the striations briefly, and they have nuclei within the striations. And then we have the cardiac muscle over here, also has striations, has nucleus, but also has these intercalated discs that you will see added. And then smooth muscle is very smooth, no striations, and just has nucleus throughout. Structures of the skeletal muscle, major structures. Each skeletal muscle is an organ composed mainly of skeletal muscle cells and connective tissue. Most skeletal muscle extends from one bone across a joint to another bone. And the attachment of these are called ligaments. Parts of the skeletal muscle, so we have the origin, which is where the muscle attachment to the bone remains relatively stationary and is fixed when movement at the joint occurs. Insertion is the point of attachment to the bone that moves when the muscle contracts, and the body is the main part of the muscle. Structures of the skeletal muscle. Muscle attaches to bone by tendons, which are strong cords of fibrous connective tissue. Some tendons are enclosed in a synovial-lined tube called tendon sheaths. Tendons are lubricated by the synovial fluid. And most oftentimes we see that synovial fluid in our hinge-type joints. Bursa is a small synovial-lined sac containing a small amount of synovial fluid located between some tendons and underlying bones. So here is a picture of the mechanism of muscle contraction. And mainly what I want you to get off of this slide is that calcium plays an important role in muscle contraction, and without proper calcium in our body, we cannot move or our muscles cannot contract. So here a muscle impulse travels to a muscle fiber through a motor neuron, so that's up here, and as you can see the little arrows are showing the impulse traveling along the muscle fiber membrane, because this is the membrane and the impulse is traveling along it. The impulse triggers the release of the calcium ion from the endoplasmic reticulum and into the cytoplasm. So that's what you can see here. These are little calcium deposits and they're being released into the cytoplasm. The calcium ions bind to the thin filament, which is these little red things here, and permit action and react with myosin. Myosin heads form ratcheting cross bridges with actin, which pull the thin filament towards the middle of the sarcomere. So this whole thing here is a sarcomere, and these thin red lines are being pulled together by the myosin, thus producing a contraction. Function of the skeletal muscle. Muscles produce movement by pulling on bones. As a muscle contracts, the insertion bone is pulled closer to the origin bone. Movement occurs at the joint between the origin and the insertion. Groups of muscles usually contract to produce a single movement. We have prime movers, which muscle whose contraction is mainly responsible for producing a given movement. Synergists, which are muscles whose contraction help the prime mover produce a given movement. So this is sometimes when there are a group of muscles that work together. And then the antagonist, which is a muscle whose action opposes the action of the prime mover in any given movement. Types of muscle contraction called tonic contractions enable us to maintain body position. Only a few muscle fibers shorten at one time. Tonic contractions produce no movement of the body parts. Heat production. In order to survive, we need to produce heat. Survival depends on the body's ability to maintain a constant temperature. When we have a high temperature, we will call this pyrexia, and when we have a low temperature, this is called hypothermia. And these are signs of illness. Contraction of muscle fibers produce most of the heat required to maintain normal body temperature. Heat is produced by the breakdown of ATP during muscle contractions. Fatigue. Reduced strength of muscle contraction caused by repeated muscle stimulation without adequate rest periods. Repeated muscular contraction depletes the cellular ATP, or its energy stores, and outstrips the ability of the blood supply to replenish oxygen and nutrients. Contraction in the absence of adequate oxygen produces lactic acid, which contributes to muscles burning and can also contribute to muscle soreness in the days after strenuous exercise. Oxygen debt, the metabolic effort required to burn excess lactic acid that may accumulate during prolonged periods of exercise. Labored breathing after strenuous exercise is required to pay the debt that we have incurred during that exercise. The increased metabolism helps restore energy and oxygen reserves to pre-exercise levels. The role of other body systems in movement. Muscle functioning depends on the function of many other body parts, and really everything in our body has some sort of muscle structure that helps us out. The motor unit is a stimulation of muscle by the nerve impulse is required before a muscle can shorten and produce movement. A motor neuron is a nerve cell that transmits an impulse to a muscle, causing contraction. The neuromuscular junction, or NMJ, is the point of contraction between a nerve ending and the muscle fiber it invades. A motor unit is the combination of a motor neuron and the muscle cells and the cells it innervates. So here's a picture, and A is under a microscope, and it shows us the big motor neurons, the muscle fibers, and then the neuromuscular junction. So you have a motor neuron, and these little blue things on the ends are the neuromuscular junctions, and these can be spread out throughout several different muscle fibers to cause that one particular muscle to contract. And sometimes there are many motor neurons that work together in the contraction of one muscle. The muscle will contract only if an applied stimuli reaches a certain minimal level of intensity. We call this the threshold stimuli. So there has to be enough motor neurons stimulating one particular area in order to contract the muscle. Once stimulated by the threshold stimulus, a muscle fiber will contract completely, and the response is an all or none response. So either there's enough stimuli and it contracts, or there's not and it doesn't contract at all. And sometimes we will get a continuous partial contraction of muscle, and we oftentimes call this muscle tone. Twitch and tetanic contractions. Twitch contractions are quick, jerky responses to stimuli. Tetanic contractions are sustained and steady muscular contractions caused by a series of stimuli bombarding a muscle in rapid succession. Isotonic contractions are contractions of muscle that produce movement at a joint. During isotonic contractions, the muscle changes length, causing the insertion end of the muscle to move relative to the point of origin. Concentric contractions shorten muscle. Eccentric contractions allow muscle to increase in length. Most types of body movements, such as walking and running, are caused by isotonic contractions. Isometric contractions are muscle contractions that do not produce movement. The muscle as a whole does not shorten, although no movement occurs during isometric contractions. Tension in the muscle increases. So this is what happens when we are trying to hold something. So like we're holding a box at a 90-degree angle with our arms. That's an isometric hold. So here's a better picture of trying to get an idea of the different contractions. Isotonic, which is on the left-hand side here, is where the muscle changes length. So this is when maybe our forearm changes the degree in angle and pushes or pulls something away from us. So this is very much changing the length of the muscle, and as we contract it, it shortens, and when we are not contracting that muscle, it then lengthens back out. Isometric is where we hold that position, and our muscles, say we're carrying something really heavy, we are not changing the length, but we are changing the tension in the muscle and able to hold that heavy object. So that's isometric.